Hi, this is International Master Squarology. In this Chess.com lesson, I'm going to be talking about king position. FIDE master and chess coach Emmanuel Neyman came up with 7 signals that let you know when to look for tactics. The first and most important signal is king position. All of these examples come from the 2013 Tromso Chess World Cup. This position comes from the classical game between Vasily Ivanchuck and Vladimir Kramnik. Kramnik has a slight advantage thanks to his outside passer on a4, but it shouldn't be enough to win. Now, one thing he does not want to do is take on e5, because then he loses the a4 pawn, he loses his outside passer, and what results is a theoretical draw. So Kramnik, instead, played g6 to play king g7, just to improve his king position, even if slightly. White should play h3 and move the king back and forth, or side to side. He can do that with the queen as well, and that'll be enough for a draw. It's a passive way of playing, but it's enough for a draw. Instead, he played f4, and this weakened the king. It might not look like it, but it does weaken the king. And after a few more moves, Ivanchuck had weakened the king just too much. Now black has 2 advantages: the exposed king on g2 and the outside passer on a4. Ivanchuck could have put up more resistance, but I can't really blame him. When your king is so exposed, it's really hard to play because you have to find the best defensive moves. It was only a matter of time before Kramnik found some way to checkmate White's king. With total domination of the second rank, White's king had no chance of surviving. With that in mind, here's a king position tip. Exercise caution when moving pawns in front of your king. This position comes from the rapid game between Lequang and Alexander Grischuk. White to play. Try to find the best move. Ready? Rook f4, forking the king and the knight. Black has no choice but to take, and it's a draw by stalemate. White's king has no legal moves. In the game, Lequang did not find it. He played rook a8, and he still managed to draw, but he had to suffer a bit. I think the reason he didn't find it was because his own king was stalemated. Now, usually when that happens, when your own king is stalemated, that means that your opponent is going to have tactics in his favor. So, because that happens so frequently, White didn't think twice about looking for tactics in his favor. Here's another tip. A stalemated king means look out for tactics. This position comes from the blitz game between Yevgeny Tomashevsky and Alexander Morozevich. White's threatening queen takes d5, and that would fork the king and the rook. So black has to do something about his bishop. If he moves it back to c6, then he loses d6, and he's probably going to lose all of his kingside pawns. And if he takes on c4, then white gets the initiative. So in the game, Morozevich tried queen e6. This is counterintuitive because now the queen is overloaded. It's defending d5 and d6, and after bishop h3, it can't go back to f7, because then d6 falls. So it almost looks like black is losing, because his queen is overloaded and it's being attacked. But Morozevich finds a really nice resource. He takes on h3, and he allows white to fork him on d5. But he allows this because he's kept in mind his opponent's weak king position. White's king has become kind of weak. If white takes on a8, then he's going to lose massive material, because after rook h8, black is now threatening to checkmate white. And after queen b7, he has to give up the queen. He has no other way to avoid checkmate. And then black is able to go into an endgame where he's up material, and he still can start advancing his pawns, or he could go back and continue to target white's king. So he's doing really well. In the game, Tomashevsky did not take the rook on a8. Instead, he played knight d6. Now, if black plays rook h8, queen f7 is bothersome. Alright, so in the game, Morozevich ended up losing, I mean, he ended up drawing, and then he was knocked out of the tournament. But still, it was amazing for him to keep the game alive, because it looked like he was in dire straits, but he still kept the game alive. Another king position tip: always keep your opponent's king position in mind. This position comes from the classical game between Alexander Shimonov and Gadakamsky. White has a poor king position, and black he not only has an attack, but he has excellent alignment. In the game, he played knight g3, but he had a better move. You can pause it if you want to try to find it. Ready? Queen h2. And if white takes, then he gets checkmated in short order. And then if he tries to run away, black simply wins material. Another king position tip: look for tactics when your opponent's king position is weak. This position comes from the classical game between Shahryar Mamedyarov and Gadakamsky. So it's white's turn, and white has a dangerous d-pawn. What he's going to do is try to advance it, and black is going to target white's poor king position, because that's what he has as compensation. White has a dangerous d-pawn, and black has a target in white's king. So white plays a sequence of moves that makes a lot of sense. He gets a dangerous d-pawn. He starts advancing his main trump in the position. But black goes for checkmate. Alright, now here, if black takes the pawn, which is threatening to promote, then he loses the knight on e4. So it doesn't really make sense to do that. Instead, he plays rook f2 and threatens checkmate. So white has to respond, and he does so by playing queen f2, which captures the rook. And now he goes into a position, we arrive at a position where white is up a rook. He's up a full rook, but because his king position is so bad, black is able to find a way to save the game. He plays queen h4, and now he's threatening some nasty discoveries with knight d3, followed by taking on c1. So white has no choice but to move the king. This allows black to get some of his material back, and it's going to be really easy for black to pick up the rest of the pawns. Here's another king position tip: an opponent's weak king position might give you compensation. This next example is the most important one. White is David Navarra from Czech Republic, and black is Jan Ludwig Hammer. Now, black's king position is a little bit shaky, because white has an active queen, a good alignment. He could think about playing something like queen h4, knight g5, and queen h7 checkmate. And he also has e6, which sensitizes f7 and g6, and it would be attacking the d7 knight. So black has to defend. And this is why it's so important, because king position, of course, king position is a signal that will let you know that there's a tactic on board, but the thing with king position is that a lot of times you're going to have to take on bad king position, like Jan Ludwig Hammer does in this position. His king is a little bit shaky. It shouldn't be losing, but I know that it could maybe cause some uneasiness with you if you're not used to defending, or if you don't like defending. So Hammer continues defending carefully, and now white plays a very risky move. He goes for it. He just risks everything. He plays rook e1 and allows the fork. Knight h7 is a scary move. At first sight, it's pretty scary, because white has lots of pieces around black's king, but it's not a sound sacrifice. First, let's look at what happens if he does take on h7. Okay, so knight h7, queen g6, and after king h8, he's gonna get checkmated. Rook h4, threatening rook h7 checkmate, and if black takes the rook on h4, then queen g7 is checkmate. It's the end of the game. And if he takes with the king, then white can play knight f8, and he's going to win the queen due to the discovery. So taking on h7 is taboo, but black can play knight e6. He takes the knight, and he takes all the material and then he defends, and this is fine. A lot of your games will be like this. Your opponent will make an unsound sacrifice to stalemate your king or put your king in danger, but it won't be enough. So really what you have to do, and in this position actually black has a counterattack. He's threatening checkmate. The game didn't last long. After bishop d2, rook e6, white resign. So the last king position tip. Many of your opponents are going to attack you. Deal with it. Work on your skills to find the best moves in both offensive and defensive positions. In this Chess.com lesson on king position, I gave you a lot of tips, so let's review them. Exercise caution when moving pawns in front of your king. A stalemated king means look out for tactics. Always keep your opponent's king position in mind. Look for tactics when your opponent's king position is weak. An opponent's weak king position might give you compensation. And last, but definitely not least, many of your opponents are going to attack you. Deal with it. Learn how to defend, and there will be a reward for you. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter at Squarology. Bye guys.